The tree is a common universal symbol that can be found in many different traditions throughout history. In Celtic mythology, trees were revered as their roots pierced the underground realms of the otherworld, while their branches reached high into the heavens. Have you ever heard of the legendary guardians of the five provinces? Titles given to the five special trees that were once considered sacred. According to folklore, a tall stranger, some say a giant, came to the court at the High King of Tara. He gathered all of the wisest men and shared with them his abundant knowledge. The stranger brought with him different fruit. A sage from the court extracted seeds from his gifts and planted them all across the lands. What grew from these seeds became the guardian trees of Ireland. 3 of the 5 trees were ash trees. One was an oak, and the last one was a yew. The yew is traditionally and regularly found in churchyards in England, Wales, Scotland, Ireland, and northern France. Yews may grow to become extremely large and live up to 2,000 years old. At least 250 yews today are as old or older than the churchyards in which they stand. Some were there when the first Saxon and British churches were built. Scientists use a method called dendrochronology, which examines the growth rings to date trees. However, yews are notoriously hard to date because the inside of the tree rots, so there is often little remaining of the rings. As old branches die, new life can form within them. It's a tree that may look old, but is consistently renewing itself. As a result, the trunks can grow to a massive diameter. Threats to the yew are limited, however, it is susceptible to root rot. The yew is historically a prized wood for lute construction, as well as being a high-valued lumber for making longbows, since it possesses that perfect combination of strength and elasticity for shooting arrows at ridiculously high velocities. The entire yew is poisonous, with the slight exception of the red berry covering the seed. If any of the leaves or seeds of the plant are ingested, urgent medical attention is recommended. It can only take about a minute for the tree's poison to kill humans, dogs, and cattle, while birds and deer can eat the plants without any ill effects. Accounts by Romans recorded how Celtic tribes would rather kill themselves with the yew's poison than be defeated by Roman armies. Nothing grows beneath the yew due to its carpet of poisonous spines and the dark shadow of its dense canopy. Due to it being poisonous, a mask should be worn if one comes into contact with sawdust from the wood. Inhaled sawdust and smoke from burned greenery may prove deadly as well. The yew tree was also sacred to Hecate, the Greek goddess associated with witchcraft, death, and necromancy. Her worshippers draped wreaths of yew around the necks of black bulls, which they then slaughtered in her honor. Her yew tree is believed to root into the mouths of the dead in order to remove their soul. It was said to purify the dead as they entered Hades. In fact, it was a long pagan history of trees that caused the leaders of the Catholic Counter-Reformation to ban their planting altogether, and motivated some to even try to outright ban the yew tree. The Christian church typically found it convenient to take over existing pre-Christian sacred sites to build their churches. It has also been suggested that yews were planted at religious sites, as their long life was a symbol of eternity, or because being toxic when ingested, they were seen as trees of death. King Edward I of England ordered yew trees planted in churchyards to protect the buildings. They were planted to discourage farmers from letting their animals wander into the burial grounds, animals that ate the poisonous foliage being the consequence. Yew trees were placed in cemeteries, so they thrived on putrefaction and lived from the nutrients of the rotting corpses provided to the earth, giving them the title of the death tree. Some believe the roots of the yew spread throughout the graveyard to each corpse. Yew trees were revered by druids as symbols of immortality, death, and rebirth, with the yews being used in their ritual. The druids believed in reincarnation, whereas Christians were taught resurrection. Ancient Celts also believed in the transmigration of the soul. There is in some cases a secondary meaning of the eternal soul that survives death to be reborn in a new form. Side note, there's also a belief within Christianity that Jesus' cross was a yew tree, perhaps because of the symbolism of immortality. This belief stems from a traditional carol called the Seven Virgins, which mentions that Christ was nailed to a big yew tree. The yew tree is also a focal point in Thomas Gray's poem, Elegy Written in a Country Churchyard, which is about human finitude. The author stands alone in a graveyard, deep in thought about the deceased buried there. The speaker contemplates the end of human life throughout the poem. He remarks on the inevitability of death, reminding the reader that all people will one day die, as death is a natural part of everyone's life. Within the poem, Gray writes his own epitaph. He mentions how his life is full of sadness, but he feels proud of this fact because it means that he has lived a full life. Gray adds that man's efforts and struggles to succeed in life come to an end in death. He concludes that no one is perfect in this world, and asks the reader to not judge those found in the graveyard. In the poem, the shadow of the yew tree rests atop the graves that surround it. Here's an excerpt from that poem. Beneath those rugged elms, that yew tree's shade, where heaves the turf in many a mouldering heap, each in his narrow cell forever laid, the rude forefathers of the hamlet sleep. The verse, beneath the yew tree's shade, reminded me of Elden Ring's DLC title, Shadow of the Erdtree. Within the lands between stands an impossible to miss tree, now known as the Erdtree, a visual representation of the Golden Order and its beliefs. This great tree has gone through many different stages. It was originally known as the primordial Crucible, where all life was once blended together. Then the Greater Will sent a golden star, bearing a beast into the lands that took residence within the tree. It tapped into the spirituality and respect that already surrounded it. The great tree's roots already spread throughout the lands before the golden star's arrival. The inhabitants buried close to the Crucible roots in catacombs for a process of rebirth. The honor of being buried near the roots eventually became known as Erdtree burials, and were awarded to those devoted to the Golden Order, like ancient dragon knight Kristoff and banished knight Oleg. During the Erdtree's prime, it was known as the Age of Plenty. It was once thought that the blessed sap of the Erdtree would drip from its boughs forever. At this time, many battles were waged by Godfrey, the first Elden Lord, on the command of Queen Marika. Together they subjugated and converted surrounding cultures into followers of the Erdtree. Some refer to the Erdtree's relationship with the Crucible as a parasitic relationship due to the fact that the Elden Beast is an outside organism that attached itself to the primordial form of the Crucible and benefits by deriving nutrients, souls, to feed itself at the expense of its original form. Those buried into the roots feed the great tree through putrefaction, but also energize the Elden Beast with their souls. This is why the ancestral followers maintain their distance from the Erdtree, because a death close by may disrupt the rebirthing process that they believe in. During the Shattering, the Greater Will grew desperate, and the Erdtree managed to propagate. It formed golden seeds that grew into minor Erdtrees. Interestingly, many of the minor Erdtrees spawn near catacombs. These smaller golden trees are monitored by the Erdtree avatars, as they protect the withering Erdtree's offspring. Living jars, like Alexander, carry deceased warriors that have fallen during battle inside of them. These living jars carry the bodies to the minor Erdtrees, where the avatars use their staff to smash them and transfer all of their strength into the tree. These jars could be sealed with the same corpse wax used on the gargoyle's greatsword. Take note of the Erdtree imprinted on top of the wax. There are humanoids called guardians that protect the offspring as well. They have an ancient pact with the Erdtree, which allows them to be eternally renewed instead of dying. In return, the tree gets protection from any outside threats. After the Night of the Black Knives, Godwyn the Golden was given an Erdtree burial in the Aerese's hero's grave. Although, due to his undead state, a form of root emerged from his body, known as Deathroot. It twisted itself around the base of the great tree's roots, as seen in the deep root depths, and has started spreading blight throughout the lands between. Once you come into contact with the Deathroot, you become one of those who live in death. Remember, Deathroot comes from Godwyn's corpse, combined with the Rune of Death. Dee of the Round Table Hold mentions that he serves the Golden Order, and that he hunts those who live in death because they now oppose the principles of the Golden Order. Their existence sullies the guidance of grace and taints the Golden Order's beliefs in returning to the Erdtree. Those who live in death do not return to the Erdtree. They are living free from the Golden Order beliefs, who actively work to enforce their return. The director of Elden Ring, Miyazaki, is quoted saying, "The tree is something that's alive. It's something that grew. It's something that will eventually wither and die." And this really fits the role of something that can bestow this order, control these rules, and enforce these rules on the world. Because these two are things that will grow, and will change, and will wither, and die as well. The transition from the primordial form of the Great Tree into the Erdtree reflects the transition of the religious associations to the yew tree. The yew was once a source of power to the ancient druids, but with the arrival of Christianity, a new age of belief was ushered in. Locations that were once sacred to the ancient cultures were absorbed into a new faith. Christianity utilized those already gathered in past times to increase their own base of followers, just as the Elden Beast utilized those already buried within the roots of the Great Tree as a source of nutrients to grow stronger. The red wood and the bright red berries of the yew reminded me of the red tint of the Crucible and the blood-red flowers blooming from the golden garb of the tree guardians. In many cases, yew trees lose the heartwood from the trunk as it ages, leaving a hollow wooden tube of powdery rotten wood. This is why it's so hard to accurately find its age. After gaining entry into the Erdtree, you will see that its insides are hollow as well. As previously mentioned, yews are susceptible to root rot. The root rot of the yew is linked to the death root that grows under the Erdtree. Side note, guardian spears are crafted from a hard wood, which means they could have theoretically been crafted from the original great tree, or even the wood that sprouts from their back. The masks used by the Guardians mentioned earlier reminded me of the need for a mask if you were working with the yew tree, as it would protect you from the deadly toxins that it contained. Guardians can alternatively attack you by using the tree growing out of them, which expels a small cloud of poison. The lands between are littered with graveyards, as life and death are consistent themes throughout the story. Many of the enemies we fight are undead, soulless, or rotting away. The biggest clash of beliefs lie in the idea of rebirth, the power of the soul. This notion of life, death, and rebirth are also reflected in the mythos of the yew tree. The idea of death is a universal reality, while at the same time a great unknown. This unknown aspect allows for many interpretations and beliefs to be attributed to what rebirth means, and different methods of respecting those that have come before us. Thank you so much for your time, and I hope you have a wonderful week.